Welcome to Thursday Book Club. I'm coming to you from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and particularly at this time, I pay my respects to elders past and present. For anyone new, and we have some new people this evening, welcome. My name's Suzanne Leal, and I'm the author of 5 novels, which I thought was quite a lot until I read Sophie Masson's resume, but more about that later. Most recent of my novels are The Watchful Wife and the middle reader's book, Running with Ivan. Many of you will know, but the new ones might not, that Thursday Book Club started during COVID as a way to bring readers together, even though we couldn't be together in person. And maybe to our surprise, or at least to our delight, we're still going strong 3 years later. We've made a lot of friends and I think had a nice time. As you might also know, we meet weekly on Zoom like this. Normally we chat about books that we've read. Once a month I have a guest author, and it's my delight to have Sophie Masson. For those, if you've got friends who'd like to join Thursday Book Club, just need to go to my website, which is easy. It's just my name, so suzanneleal.com, and you can sign up, and we'd love to have you. Now, let's get on to the business for today. Sophie Masson is the author of 70 books. That's not 7, it's 70 books. And her most recent book, The Paris Cooking School, is out next Wednesday. So we're only Thursday, so we get a sneak preview at the new book. Welcome to you, Sophie.
Thanks very much, Suzanne, and thank you for inviting me, and hello to everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Where are you coming to us from today, Sophie?
Well, I live near Armidale in Anawin country in the New England region. We're about 15 kilometres from Armidale, but on a block, rural block, 6 acres, in a mud brick house that we built ourselves. So, and just it's been, it's a lovely area to live. It's a bit cold in the winter, but I don't mind that. Yeah, we've lived here for quite a long time now.
I'd just like to reel that back a bit. In a mud brick house you built yourself. I think what you didn't add was that you built yourself with 3 young children.
Yes.
Can you just walk me through first the idea and then practically how that worked?
Well, we had a house. We had bought our first house in Guyra, which is like up the mountain from Armidale, and it's much higher. It's about 1,300, where it was about 1,000 meters here. And when we knew that it would only be a kind of transitional place in some ways, because we wanted to be much closer to Armidale, and Guyra is about 35 k's from Armidale. And so we sold the house in Guyra. We had been there for 5 years, and the 2 boys were born when we were up there. And our daughter, she was 5 years old when they came along. So we bought a block in a place called Invergowrie, which is a sort of a rural subdivision, 15 kilometres from Armidale. And we decided we wanted to build our own house, and we decided we wanted to build a mud brick house because both of us come from Europe. I'm from France and my husband's from the UK. And we're both used to seeing, houses that were built from materials that come from the place where the house is actually sited. And we thought, well, in Australia, that means mud brick or stone or whatever, maybe timber, but it's a bit harder with that. And so this block that we bought had perfect soil for it. So very heavy clay soil. It's a bit of a pain sometimes in gardening because, it doesn't drain well and things like that. Although in the drought, it's better than the free draining soils in some ways because it retains water more. But anyway, so we knew that the clay was good here. And so we started making the bricks. And basically, we'd never done it before. My husband had helped to build somebody else's house a long time ago in Scotland, but he had never built in mud brick. And so we basically started doing that, and it took us about a few months to make all the bricks for the first part of the house, and then they had to sit to dry in the air, and then in the spring we came back and we started building the house. So it was, yeah, we had 3 young children. Like the youngest was 2, and then there was a 4-year-old, and then a 9-year-old. So, you know, we had to keep them happy as well. So, but they were happy for quite a while, paddling around in the mud, and you know, they got actually permission to paddle around in the mud. That was great, you know, and covered in mud from head to foot. But yes, and they were pretty good actually. And we also told them that we would build a kennel for a dog, and we didn't have a dog yet. So they wanted to build a kennel for the dog. And so, you know, after that took us a few months, and then within a year we were able to move into the first part of the house, and we were all together in this big room with a bathroom and kitchen as well. And then we built the bedrooms, and like our bedroom, the kids' bedroom, which was upstairs, you know, and then the spare room with bathroom, etc., for guests. And that took another 2 years. So within 3 years, we had this complete house. And also David was working in the garden because his parents had a small holding in Britain, and he was brought up doing all that sort of stuff. So we also knew that the soil wasn't brilliant, you know, so it had to be built up with compost and all sorts of things. But now it's extremely productive. And the other thing that he was keen on trying was independent solar power. So this was back, you know, more than 30 years ago. No subsidies, very hard to get stuff. You had to go to Nimbin to get basically equipment and things like that, to Rainbow Power, which was one of the first of the solar power companies. And we also bought solar panels and stuff. Anyway, that turned out really well as well. So David wired the whole house for solar power, and because it's totally safe, you know. And it's worked brilliantly ever since. I mean, we've had to change batteries a couple of times, but the batteries have lasted a very long time. And we've never, ever had a blackout. Even when you can see other houses, sometimes they have blackouts, you know, they used to, especially before. So it's been great. That both things turned out really well. But like I said, we took big risks and we were a bit crazy, I suppose. But it worked out, and we have a lovely house that we really like being in. And yeah, so that's the story of that.
So does that mean if you're independently solar run, so you're coming to us by internet, so during the day, obviously that works from the panels, and during the night that works on the battery, or do you have
That's right. Yeah, we've got massive batteries. Well, it's not a Tesla battery or anything like that. It's just a lead acid battery, but they're really very good. And in fact, in some ways, they're more versatile than the lithium batteries, and they're much less expensive. You know, there are companies that make them specifically for solar power systems, like in remote areas, in the outback and so on. People use those sort of things as well. So yeah, it's never run out, like never. There's been a couple of times when we've had a lot of you know, cloudy weather where there's not been much sun, and after about 3 days you have to start a generator just to top up the battery, but it's never actually run out. And that's happened, like literally I can count them on the fingers of one hand in 30 years, you know.
Extraordinary. Now, I could talk about that all night, but we are
no.
let's get to the book. Yes. So I would like you, so look, I'll do the cover reveal of the advance copy, yes, which is very nice, but slightly less exciting than the real yes copy. So Sophie, can you do me the real copy?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
So that's the back. Yeah. Yeah, yes. It looks really beautiful. It has a lovely look, very appealing, you know, and it's also, I know you can't see it from here, but this is sort of embossed or debossed. I'm not sure which is the right word, but when you touch it, it feels beautiful as well, and just the whole color scheme is beautiful.
I'm interested in the in the strawberry tart. Yes. But do you have to make it and photograph it, or do you use a stock image?
No. No, well, basically that one was actually created by a lovely illustrator who actually I've worked with on other things, called Cheryl Orsini.
Mm.
And because the publisher wanted that particular sort of tart, so there. And but I had found an image in Pinterest, I think. But of course, there's copyright issues and things like that, and they needed one. And so because we knew that Cheryl, does fantastic food things. I mean, if you ever look at her Instagram page, I mean, I guarantee you'll want to buy some of the things. They're just wonderful. And so she created this picture based on descriptions in the book. So yeah, it's just an illustration, but it's actually going to become a real thing because we're going to have a bit of a local launch in Armidale on the 11th of November. And it's going to be held in this wonderful cafe patisserie, which is actually called Cafe Patisserie. And the guy there is this wonderful pastry cook. And he's going to make some tarts exactly like that. So they're going to become real.
So if anyone is in Armidale on the 11th
Yes.
of November, is it
11th of November, you're very, very welcome. It's at 2 p.m. on the 11th of November. It's totally free to attend, and there'll be all that lovely food and so on as well.
fantastic? I just last year and this year spent 4 months in La Rochelle in France,
Nice.
and I'd forgotten those patisseries. And when I was really little, when I was living in France, I could just eat whatever I wanted.
Yes.
Of course, the time goes by, but just I don't know for anyone who's been there or seen it, just those windows.
I know, they're beautiful. They're little works of art, aren't they? They just, every time I go there, I'm sort of, licking the windows, as they say in French. I'm going to all the beautiful. They're like little jewels and things all set out, and and it's just, I guess there's a lot of things like that in France where the displays are beautiful. They're really appetizing, and they've thought about positioning, and that's just with ordinary patisseries and bakeries. It's not like high-end things, it's just your local neighborhood one.
And gift wrapping too.
That's right.
It's always been an art, I think.
Yes, exactly. Things are well presented, it's even if it's simple, because that's often a thing. People often think, oh, French means fancy, and in my experience, and it's nowhere close to the truth. It's actually a simple thing, but a simple eye for color and pattern and so on.
And when you say in your experience, I mean, you've had a lot of experience. So you were born in Indonesia, but you didn't stay there very long. Where did you go after that?
Now, I got very well. My parents both French, so my mother comes from the Basque Country, from Biarritz, and my father comes from Toulouse. But they left France in their sort of early 30s, or no, late 20s, I think. They had two daughters already who were born in France, my two older sisters. And they came to Indonesia to work because it was difficult to find work in France at the time. This was post-war and early 50s, in fact, when they first thought about it. But they didn't leave France till the mid to late 50s. And so they came to Indonesia to work they worked for a big French company, which built big civil constructions and so on. So I was born there, and so was my younger sister. But when I was 9 months old, I got dysentery, and I was so sick that my parents thought I might die if I stayed there. So my mother took me back to my paternal grandmother in Toulouse. And I stayed with her till I was 4 years old. My parents went back to Indonesia, and they stayed there the whole time. So I only knew them from photographs. And I lived in a completely French world. Like there was no other language spoken in the house. And there was my grandmother and my two teenage aunts. And I was the center of their world, the cherished only child. And then when my parents came back from Indonesia and they'd got a job transfer in Australia, and suddenly I had to meet them. I was suddenly number 3. I had 3 sisters who I didn't know at all. And we went to Australia, to a country whose language I did not understand one word of. And I started school pretty much a week after we arrived. So it was like, and because my parents worked for this company, they had a lot of great advantages as expatriates. And so they used to pay for them to go back to France every 2 years. And so we had a house in France, so every holiday we went there. And my parents made sure that we stayed bilingual, like we weren't allowed to speak English to them at home and all that sort of thing. So I grew up between the two worlds, and it was like, you know, literally having a foot in both worlds and a foot in both languages. And with my brothers and sisters, we still do that. Like we talk partly in French, partly in English, in the same sentence, often, sometimes even in the same word, which gets mangled totally, you know. So it was, so I was always in those two worlds. And, you know, I mean, it can seem hard for a kid to have to navigate that, but in fact, up until adolescence, I didn't even realize it was supposed to be hard. You know, it was just what it was, because you know what little kids are like, you don't really think about it, and everything's normal that's in your life. In adolescence, of course, nothing is normal, you know, and you can't stand this and you can't stand that. And, you know, I was embarrassed because, you know, and also because of my looks, I take more after the Basque and Spanish and Portuguese side of the family. And so people didn't necessarily recognize that I was French, and I got asked if I was all sorts of things. And occasionally, very occasionally, I have to stress, got some racist and xenophobic comments and stuff. But mostly people were very nice, and, you know, I got on well with the kids at school and so on. But it could be a bit confusing, you know. But of course, in the end, I realized I had this huge asset, which was being bilingual, being from two worlds, being able to have access as a writer. I always loved words and writing. Being able as a writer to be able to know those two languages intimately, and so they enrich each other.
So why did you choose to write in English rather than French, or have you chosen to write in both languages?
Well, I have written a few short stories and so on in French, and I even won an award for one of them. But I guess it's because, look, I decided that I'm a dual national still. I've got two passports, and I go back to France very often and so on. But Australia is our home now. It's our family home. Our children grew up here, etc. And I started my career in Australia, and Australia's been very, very good to me in terms of both my career and my personal life. And so, you know, I feel that writing in English for me is the way that I'm going to reach the most readers. And it's a language that I feel extremely comfortable in, but that is also a language that, because it's not my mother tongue, I can actually invest with other things, you know, that come from French. And also, you know, France is a wonderful, wonderful country, and in many ways, you know, has a wonderful society, certainly a wonderful way of life in many ways. But it's very hard to break into publishing there. And even me, I've had so many books out. There's only one of my books that's been translated into French, and that was under a pseudonym anyway. But it's almost like, I think they look at my name, which is 100% classical French, super classically French, with not a hint of the Basque and the Spanish and Portuguese and etc. And then they think, but she lives in Australia and she's writing in English. Why is that? This is not right, you know. So it doesn't, that's just my fancy, you know. I've been translated in lots of other languages, but my own mother tongue, no, not really.
It's interesting. There are two authors that I know whose writing I find particularly beautiful, who both write in a non-mother tongue language. So, first of all, Lee Kaufman, who was brought up in Russia, but then grew up. Well, she was born in Russia, then was an adolescent in Israel, and moved to Australia at 27. And she writes in English. And there, as you say, there's something about her command of the language, which, you know, often they say for writers, the observer is the best placed person. So it's almost as though she observes the language and uses it to her best advantage. And there's a Chinese American author called Yong Li who's similar. And I'm wondering if that's what you mean as well, that you have two languages to draw upon in order to make the one you choose richer.
Yes, I think that's right. I certainly feel that. I hope that, readers love what I write. But for me as a writer, it's very much a very, very rich experience because I can draw on that extra thing. I was thinking also, there's a writer called André Makina who has been translated into English as well, but he writes in French and he's Russian from Siberia. And he actually wrote a book called Le Testament Français, which is also called that in English. I might add, they didn't translate the title. And it really is about being in two languages and the gap between those, all bound up in a story, that sort of has echoes of the Gulag and stuff like that. So, and I think that, it is something which is very, it can be, obviously it can make people inarticulate if they can't express themselves. But I think when you can, it does make it richer. But at the same time, there's plenty of monolingual English and French language writers who write absolutely perfectly and beautifully, and that I wish I could write like them as well.
Let's turn to the Paris Cooking School. Of course, you give it away in the title. It's about Paris. It's about a cooking school, but more than anything, it's about the lives of three women, of Kate, Gabby, and Sylvie. Can you tell me a little bit about Sylvie?
Yes, so Sylvie is Sylvie Morel. She's the owner and director of the Paris Cooking School, and she has been running this school in Paris for 15 years. And basically, it's aimed at not at French people, but at foreign students who want to come and learn about the French way of cooking. And it's not about cordon bleu, it's not about high-end cooking, it's about home cooking. It's about a French attitude to cooking. It's about, feeling comfortable with that and drawing people in through stories and through nice experiments and little outings and so on that she creates. And I had a lot of fun creating her school, and the sorts of things that I had to think really carefully. Okay, what would you do? Because the courses that she runs are for 1 month, and they obviously in Paris itself, so you get to know Paris well. And so I had to think really, okay, what sort of thing would I like to go to if I was going to something like that? And I would want to know not just about recipes and ingredients and so on. I would like to know about the culture. I would like to know about the sort of ideas behind the food, about what they express about food. So that was a lot of fun doing that. And creating this totally imaginary school, but that I think could actually work quite well.
And do you like cooking? Was this something that you just plucked out, or did it feed into your interest anyway?
Yes, look, I really like cooking and I love trying new things. And my family, in my birth family, my mother's a fantastic cook. My father's also very keen on cooking. And, the whole thing revolves around food. A lot of French culture revolves around that, around sitting around the table and so on. So it's very much a traditional thing with us, and it was just normal. And my husband also, he comes from England, but his family was also very keen on food, and they cooked in an English way, not a French way, but it was always really good ingredients, thinking about it. And because I had the small holding, of course, I had a lot of very fresh stuff. And so our kids grew up with that too. And I'm very happy to say they're all really good cooks. And also the other thing was not making, this is going to sound like a weird metaphor, but not making a meal out of cooking. You know what I mean? It's like not stressing about it. Just thinking, okay, I've got these ingredients here. What can I do with them? And so some of the things that I cook are things that are inspired by French cooking or by other cooking, but that I don't necessarily follow exactly. It's like an adaptation, but because I've been cooking for a long time, I suppose, I do know the things that work and don't work. And the whole idea with the food that's described in the Paris Cooking School is about food that's totally unintimidating to cook and to enjoy. It's just simple, and it relies on good ingredients and, a bit of imagination and not being afraid to try things.
And of course, to have this cooking skill, you need people to come to do it. And
Yes.
the two that you focus on is a woman called Kate and one called Gabby. Where's Kate come from? What's her story?
Well, so Kate is from Melbourne, and she has just recently been through a very bad breakup with her ex-husband, who betrayed her very, very badly. And I won't say exactly how because you have to read the book. But he and she were involved in setting up this startup, which went bananas. And but he's sort of one of these sort of tech guys who's a bit up himself. And anyway, so she's recovering from this terrible experience, and she's decided she really needs a complete break. And she's always loved cooking, but she's never done anything with it because she's always worked on this company. And so for her, Paris is this escape, and being at the cooking school is going to be wonderful. And it does turn out extremely well for her in all sorts of ways. She was a lovely character to write because, I felt she had a broken heart, but she didn't have a broken spirit. She was somebody who was trying to piece her life back together and who just needed that space, which was safe, which was joyful, which was completely away from this horrible emotional battleground back in Australia. Yeah, so she was a lovely character.
When we meet Gabby, we know a little bit less about her. Tell me about Gabby and why she appealed to you as a character.
So Gabby is an artist, a visual artist, and she is both a painter, but she also works in mixed media. She's done sort of installations and things like that. She's young; she's in her very early 30s. And she has very interesting ethnic background. So her father is from the Basque Country. Guess where that came from? So I know that area very well. So I knew I could write about it easily. And her mother is from the Channel Islands, from Guernsey. So basically, she was born in Australia. However, when her parents met in Australia, when they were both on working holidays, and she's been beavering away for years, happily, and sort of little experimental art shows and all this sort of stuff. And then suddenly she had this show called Shadow Life, which was a massive success. And it just terrified her because of suddenly she's the focus of attention. Suddenly, people were saying all sorts of things about her work that she didn't even know she was saying. And she's just in panic stricken in a way, and it's led to this creative block. So she knows she's got to put together another show, and her agent has been gently telling her, please, please, please. And so this is supposed to be a circuit breaker. If she goes to Paris, she speaks French perfectly. She doesn't have problems with the language or anything like that. But it's not her family stamping ground. It's a totally different territory. And at the same time, she's immersed in cooking. And her family is the type of family that just naturally cooks, So she's naturally cooked, but without thinking a lot about it. And so this is like this thing where she's hiding, where she's hiding, and she doesn't tell any of her fellow students that she's an artist at first. And even to the guy that she meets there, and she'd say, I'm an apprentice, I'm just sort of a student of cooking, She doesn't want to say because she's afraid of being categorized again if they know who she is.
Mm. And then the plot unravels or progresses. Yes. Interestingly, this is not a book by Sophie Masson, it's a book by Sophie Beaumont.
Yes, that's right.
Why did you take a pen name for this?
Well, this was really a discussion between the publisher and I, and it was felt that because I've had a lot of books out, as you know, Suzanne, and a lot of those books have been for young people. I have written for adults before, but most of them have been for young people. And the idea is that booksellers in particular would instantly think that this was a book for kids, and it's absolutely not. So it had to be a different name, but they felt that it was important I kept my first name, and that the name that we chose would be very French but very pronounceable, like Masson is too, actually, of course. But and we talked about the possibilities of who, this and that surname, which is quite fun, picking a pen name. But I think it was a really good move because it's instantly created something different, a different profile, different presence.
Excellent. So, but it's not the first time that you've used a pen name, though.
No, that's right.
Why have you used it in the past? For a similar reason? Or?
Yeah, similar reasons. So the others in the past were for kids, but one of the pen names was Isabel Merlin. And Merlin actually happens to be a family name. It's not just Merlin the magician.
Right.
A 17th century ancestor of ours had the name Merlin, a surname, and Merlin, in French. And anyway, these were 4 romantic thrillers for teenagers that I wrote under that name. They're all set in France, by the way, and that was one of the ones that was actually published in France, the first one. And so they were quite different from other books, and they were very, at the same time, they were not sequels or anything else, but they were kind of companion volumes in a sense. And then the other 2, I had 2 novels for middle grade readers, which under the name of Jenna Austen. And this was marketed as Jane Austen's little sister because they were the first one. So they were called the Romance Diaries. And the first one was called Ruby. And that was based on Emma by Jane Austen. It was inspired by Emma, loosely inspired, let's say. And the second one was called Stella, also the Romance Diaries. And that was based on Pride and Prejudice, so inspired by Pride, but sort of middle grade teenage style, sort of, yeah. So they were fun to write as well. And once again, they felt that this was quite different. So one lot was romantic thrillers, the other one were romantic comedies, really.
I've noticed the time. We're going to go just a few more minutes. But I just wanted to let everybody in the audience know that if you'd like to pop a question in the chat box, or if there's an issue with that, just pop your hand up when you're on video, and then we'll take you off sound. In the meantime, though, I'm going to ask Sophie, what we do, we have a guest at Thursday Book Club, is to ask the guests for 3 book recommendations that we'll then put in the newsletter for next week for everybody who couldn't be here to enjoy. Do you have some books for us?
I do indeed. And like 2 of them are in print, but in print format, but the other one is in audio format because I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I love audiobooks. And so I'll just talk about the audio one very briefly first. It's called The Summer Skies by Jenny Colgan. And Jenny Colgan is a British author of, commercial women's fiction, which is pretty much in the field that the Paris Cooking School is in as well. And she's written a number of books. They're very good, very, very good. Some of the best sort of examples of, they're kind of romantic comedies, and sometimes they're quite tragic elements as well. She's a very good writer. Her prose is very beautiful. It flows beautifully. And she's quite surprising, and her characters are very, very vivid. So The Summer Skies is her latest. It came out this year. And it's about a young pilot called Morag, and it's set in the northern islands of Scotland. Beautiful. She always has fantastic descriptions of, scenery and people and everything else. And it's just a lovely, lovely book. And it has quite a lot about piloting and planes and so on. Everything from piloting enormous planes to little tiny ones. But that doesn't detract at all from the story. And there's always in her books, there's a romantic catastrophe, if you like, at the beginning, and then things work out later. But it's a lovely book, and it's a lovely escapist read. And I think the audio version too is beautiful. It's really well read. And moving to something very different from that. You may have already seen this.
I haven't read it.
Cold Enough for Snow It is an extraordinary book. I mean, very short, you know, it's a novella really. And I saw that today it was announced that it's been shortlisted for the Prime Minister's Literary Awards. But it's a strange book in many ways, but strangely beautiful and very hard to describe, but quite gripping, despite the fact that you'd think that not much happens in it. But it is one of the most extraordinary books. In a way, it's quite poetic, and yet it's also very matter of fact. It's very hard to describe, but I really, really recommend it to. Very different, like I say, to the Jenny Colgan, but also really worth reading. And then the third one is this one. It's called The Other Side of Mrs. Wood by Lucy Barker. And it's a historical novel set in the 19th century in the world of mediums, you know, spiritual mediums, you know, so in the whole spiritualist thing. And and it's really about the, if you like, the competition, the rivalry between two mediums, and in particular, two particular ones, one up and coming one and one more established one. But what I really liked about it was that it really puts you in that world. There's no modern commentary at all. And they take it totally, it's totally matter of fact, the whole spiritualist thing. There's no sort of thing, oh my goodness, this is weird, or the, you know, kind of disbelieving stuff. And yet these women who are mediums, they also, what's interesting is that, you know, they did really well. Like, as women in the Victorian age, they actually had their own business, they ran their own thing, some of them did extremely well, became quite wealthy and had independent means, you know, because they did this. And they when they speak to each other, they speak in a very matter-of-fact sort of way. And it's full of touches of humor and so on. But it reminded me a bit, in a way, like, I don't know if any of you have read Wilkie Collins, like The Moonstone and things like that, and The Woman in White, his two famous books. But he wrote lots of kind of what they call sensationalist books. He was a friend of Charles Dickens, and he wrote quite differently. And it's easier to read in many ways, if I dare say so. It's less talkative, you know, than Dickens. But it had that kind of very immersive thing, but with sly touches of humor, which I found very appealing. So they're three very different books. They're all very easily available in Australia, and I recommend them all. And they're all. I'm the kind of reader who likes to jump around and read different genres and try different things. And I particularly love fiction. I have read quite a bit of non-fiction, but fiction is my real love. So yeah, I mean, they're all really fun books.
We've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Now, if anyone needs to go and you're new, the deal with this book club is the sort of book club that I'd like to join, which is if you need to go, you need to go. Don't apologize, you just go. If you come late, that's no problem. And if you haven't read anything all week, we don't care. So it's the relaxed book club. And I know that we've gone a little bit over time. So if you do need to go, please do. But we have some interesting questions. So the first one is from Fabian. Now, Fabian says, I have a question. My native language is Spanish. I write in English because I think I can reach more people in this way, but my English is not perfect. His writing's certainly perfect. Do you think this is a barrier? I use an editor who was a native English speaker. And then so that's the first question. Is it a barrier? And the second question is, or should I write in Spanish and translate it myself with the help of an editor?
Look, I think if you feel comfortable about writing in English, you should. I think that really to get somebody, yes, who helps with that at a later stage is good. If you could find somebody who was perfectly bilingual in both languages as an editor, that would obviously be the ideal, because they would be able to understand nuances and stuff that you're maybe bringing over from Spanish into your English writing. But I think I don't think it's a barrier. I think that editors can also help to bring the work, any sort of infelicities or And even now, you know, even though I'm actually pretty much perfectly bilingual, there's very occasionally things where I say, I don't know how to say this in English. I can't say, I don't know how to say it. Or there isn't a way of putting it in an elegant way, you know. You might have a really nice, pithy French phrase, which, you know, I think, oh, I really want to, but when I say it in English, it sounds really bizarre, you know. So I'm sort of trying to work out a way of saying it. And so I think that, I don't think it's a barrier. I think if you like writing in English, you should do so, because writing in Spanish and then writing in English can be quite, I have done it myself, writing in French and then translating it into English, a short story. And I find that my style changes so much in between the two languages that it's actually like writing it all over again, you know, and that can be boring. That's why I have never said, oh, I can translate my novels into French or whatever, because I think, oh no, I don't want to do that. So you know, I think you should just write in English if you want to write in English, and then speak to an editor. And if you can find somebody, I'm sure there would be people around who might be fluent in both languages. Then that would be your ideal. And the other part of the question was, sorry, I've forgotten now.
No, you've actually answered
Oh,
both.
okay.
So it's not a barrier. And yes, write in Spanish, and use the editor, preferably one who is bilingual. So yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Fabian, give me a nod. That's all answered.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
No worries, and good luck with it.
Thank you.
We've got a question from Suzanne, and not me, the other Suzanne.
Yes.
Hello, are there any recipes in the book? I'm on the lookout for the audio version. Can't wait.
Oh, great. There aren't any recipes in the book. However, I have been working very hard today on some pages which will go on my blog, which are private at the moment, but which are all recipes from a whole lot of different recipes from the Paris Cooking School. And if you read the book, you'll find that Kate has a notebook. She writes down a whole lot of stuff. And so the pages look like they're from Kate's notebook, but they're all kinds of recipes. And so one page will have all the recipes, not all the recipes from the Paris Cooking School, but a whole selection of them. And then another page has a menu that you can just totally use to create your own Paris Cooking School themed meal if you want to, and it has different options within it that you can choose. So, and I have made every single dish that I've written about in these recipe pages, and taken pictures and everything, so that it'll be illustrated and everything else. So after the book is published, I will definitely be making those public, and you'll be able to consult them and download anything you want, etc. Yeah, I did ask the publisher about recipes, but they felt it was better to do it the way like that.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can't wait. I will look out for it all.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to the audiobook too, because I'm very excited about that.
So do you have it sorted out? Do you know who's going to be the narrator? And
Yes. So Wave Sound, which is a big audio producer, is producing it, and they got in touch with me and they asked me about the pronunciation of various things. I also have a few Basque words that Gabby says when she goes to the Basque country, so I just had to tell them how you said those things. They're very simple things, but and then they said, can you listen to this snippet from the narrator that we thought might be best? And so I made comments on that, which was great. I mean, she was terrific. I just had one small comment, and they sort of changed that straight away. So I haven't heard, the whole thing.
Is she a French speaker as well, or does she?
No, she's not. But she has a very good, she has a very good accent when she does say French words, and she had a really interesting way of because there's characters from different countries too who come to the Paris Cooking School. So some of the minor characters, from Germany and Japan, US, Britain, etc. And she's done that as well. So they're all speaking English to each other in the Paris Cooking School, they've all got different accents.
Gosh, I mean,
and
it's such a skill, isn't it? It's such a
Oh,
skill.
absolutely.
We have one more question. It's from Katrina Davis, and Katrina does our in the newsletter. There's a few reviews. So Abby's book shop provides us with a couple, and Katrina does other ones from Pre-Love Books, because she used to work in an op shop, and she collected. Anyway, they're very, very quirky, very funny, and very, very clever. So Katrina's question is, I'm interested in where imagination comes from for writers. Is it a gift, an innate quality, or can you nurture it? Easy question to end with.
Yes, that's a difficult one, isn't it? I think it's a bit of all three in a way. I think that being alert is one of the big things about becoming a writer, being alert to the world around you, to how people behave, to little tiny things, you know, nuances of things, but also to the world itself, the scenery, I mean, I always think, you know, I mean, every day I look at the sky and think, isn't it amazing? You know, you look at that color, you know, blue. I mean, how is that possible? You know, it's sort of this thing of being always aware of things. And I mean, sometimes it can be, you know, as you know, Suzanne, I'm sure, you know, the thing of in the most inappropriate situation, sometimes you're thinking, oh, how would I write this? You know, I mean, I remember doing that once in the middle of labor, you know, with my kids. Oh, how would I write? I mean, forgetting about it the next instant, you know, but you know, it's like, yeah, you're alert. And I think that maybe that's a gift, but it can also be nurtured. I think that people can, if they really, and think about when you were a child and you notice things that adults don't notice. And sometimes they're completely random, weird things. But children will sometimes come out with things, don't they, that you think, wow, you know. Like one of my, you know, funny ones was, you know, when children will say things and what, you know, you think it's completely kind of inappropriate in a way, but in a way it's what everyone's thinking, you know, and they come out with it. So you notice things as a child, but later in adolescence, in the tunnel of adolescence, you kind of forget about some of that stuff. And then when you come out the other end, you know, you've got a whole lot of other experiences and observations. But I think that it is both. And I think that it's a way of seeing the world and of seeing people. It's a way of being an observer. But I think everyone can help to nurture that. And I think that particularly keeping a journal or something like that is really quite a worthwhile thing to do. And even if you don't think you're going to be a published writer, or you don't even want to be, I think it's still really, really good because, you know, during the COVID years, particularly the first year, I kept this journal in which I pasted in stuff from the paper and little things that I'd seen and photographs of this and that. And the other day, I haven't wanted to look at it. You know, I haven't wanted to look at it. I didn't want to think about those years, as I think many of us don't. But the other day, I took it out and I read it and I thought, wow, you know, this is really quite interesting. And it was because it was taken in the heat of the moment, in the fire of whatever was happening. And I think that even when you don't have dramatic things like that, you know, just to keep it every day. And even if you have like a theme, I think themed journals can be really good as well to nurture that. So you can think, okay, I'm going to keep a journal that's all about how the seasons change. I'm going to be really looking at how they do change. I'm going to look in the garden. I'm going to look, I'm going to look in the shops, what's in the shops. I'm going to look at how people are dressed. I'm going to look all those things. And then you create a sort of mosaic picture of a whole year, which is quite, you know, I mean, I don't know if any of you have read Tom Lake or, yeah, it's amazing too, isn't it? I'm actually listening to it, you know, audiobook, and there's extraordinary descriptions of like nature, of the cherry trees of the farm and so on. And I think this woman has been really observing and watching and listening. And I think anyone can do that for themselves within their own their own field and their own circle.
Excellent. Excellent. I think that answers the question, doesn't it, Katrina?
Brilliant. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.
Just before we go, Sophie, will you be coming to Sydney, or will you be doing any trips for the book?
Yes, I will indeed. So on the 8th of November, I'll be speaking at the Alliance Française headquarters in Sydney in Clarence Street. They have an event every 2 months, I think, which is called Philo Bistro, which is a bit like this, except it is in French. But I will be interspersing it with some English. A novelist called Olivier Vegeta, who lives in Australia, but he's French. He's going to be interviewing me. He's read the book and so on. So that's actually, I've got a link to, I'll put a link to it on my social media page, maybe, Suzanne. You can book in, and I think you get a glass of wine, nice French wine as well, some Niblis probably. So, and that's at, that's Wednesday, the 8th of November at 6:30 p.m.
And can I also suggest, so Jane Turner is one of our members at
Yes.
Thursday Book Club, and she owns Gertrude and Alice, which is the bookshop in Bondi.
Yes.
And they also have a cafe, and she's there's Jane now, and Jane's the food's great, and Jane's excellent. So maybe it's worth a pop in.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would love to do that. In fact, I'm going to be in Sydney from the 6th to the 9th of November, and I was hoping on the Tuesday to go around bookshops and talk to booksellers and sign books. So I'll be very happy to come to your bookshop.
I think you may
Thank
find
you, Sophie. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks, Suzanne.
Oh, pleasure, Jane. I think you might find a kindred spirit in Jane. I'm going to let you all go back to books by the looks of it, Jane, or whatever you're doing for the evening. Thank you so much, Sophie. I really appreciate your time, and best of luck with the book.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks everyone, and thank you for your questions. Thank you for your attention and your interest, and very good night to everybody. And I hope if you do pick up the Paris Cooking School that you greatly enjoy it. And yeah, I'm always very, very happy, you know, if people want to contact me or put a review on Goodreads or whatever they want to do. So yeah, thank you. And thank you, Suzanne, for inviting me. It was great.
my pleasure. And we'll toast to you next week at Thursday Book Club, knowing that the book will be out on the shelves and into the world.
That'll be exciting. I'm going to have to go into town and go to our local bookshop and take pictures.
Yes, you will.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.